Hey, welcome back to another Black City Coffee vlog. In this video, we're going to hang out here on the Mill City Roasters' new website, where I am featured, by the way. Thank you. They have this new article out, and Steve sent it to me. He said, check this out. So let's see what we can learn, okay? And sometimes, when we look at a crazy, long... intimidating blog post like this, or a power page, if you will, about a certain subject, because sometimes it helps to have somebody walk you through it. So, and I think it will help me kind of get through it as well, Roastery sensory cues. Let's go. So I'm just going to read and record, and I'm going to edit it down to what I feel are the most helpful things and maybe draw your attention and point you in the direction, okay? I love how direct this is written because, and it's very indicative of like Steve's voice and writing voice. He's a really strong writer and a really strong voice. Data absent sensory cues is meaningless. But if your goal is to produce better coffee, you'll need to understand and interpret sensory cues like sight, smell, taste, and hearing. Sensory cues. So we're talking about sight, smell, taste, and hearing while you're actually roasting. And yes, there are ways to taste it at the roaster. You've seen me crunch on some roasted coffee before. Charge temp and charge temp theory. Generally speaking, coffee should be charged at the highest preheat temperature that doesn't automatically produce a heat defect. Steve, you know what? You could probably write a book, honestly. You say things with a little bit more clarity and, less theoretical, even though we're talking about theory. The goal is to make the drying phase as short as possible with the lowest application of burner heat to reduce the risk of heat defect. Okay, heat defects can be easily identified by the sight of blackened char spots on the top, bottom, or ends of the seed. It can also be smelled in freshly ground coffee as an unpleasant, sharply acrid scent. This imparts a similarly unpleasant taste. Yeah. Singeing, burning, scorching, facing, tipping. Roasters are too good to produce heat defects, so you'll have to imagine them. Preheating the roaster to a higher charge temperature has 3 benefits. First, it is simply more efficient. The sooner you get a batch out the drum, the sooner you can start with the next batch. Second, more importantly, it's important to drive the moisture out of the outer seed in a manner that conserves as much of the moisture in the inner seed as possible. Conserving that moisture means you'll have a shorter period of first crack and more precise control over post-first crack flavor development. Lastly, many coffees respond better to an overall shortened roast time to preserve their flavor profile of its origin. If light roasted coffee is your jam, an aggressive hot and fast roast profile may be the way to get you there. That is what I do, okay? Aggressive, hot and fast. Sometimes hitting first crack around 7:23. Let's just name it out there. I'm not the most consistent roaster, but I do like to roast hot and fast. If you're charging at a high temperature and you detect heat defect by either sight or scent, you should decrease your charge temperature by 10 degrees. This is interesting, an interesting ROR. At the beginning of the roast, as the coffee absorbs heat, seed color usually starts out as some version of dusty green. As the coffee heats, it becomes more vibrant green and then starts to yellow as the 10 to 12% moisture content is depleted in the outer seed. In roaster speak, this change from green to yellow by sight often mark as the end of drying or dry end, DE, green to yellow transition, right? When first crack occurs around 390, the end of drying color change is usually marked around 300 degrees. Change of color. Yes, when first crack occurs around 390. Okay, I think it should say if your first crack occurs around 390, because not to criticize your writing and everything, Steve, but I remember when I was talking to Mike or Jared, they would go, when do you hit first crack? They were talking to me, right? Are they asking me? And I would go 376, like that. because I don't, for whatever reason, the way that I roast, I was hitting 376 pretty consistently around that time, before the switch of my probe, first crack. So this sentence here, when first crack occurs around 390, it could maybe say, if you hit first crack around 390, because it also depends on what kind of machine you're using, right? The end of drying color change is usually marked around 300 degrees. Yeah, when I hit around 300 degrees, 301, I'm usually marking my green to yellow transition. When first crack occurs around 390, the end of drying color change is usually marked around 300. So he's kind of backpedaling there and going, he hit first crack at 390, okay. Are we usually seeing a dry end or green to yellow transition around 300 degrees? But I typically hit around 300 degrees, even though I hit a first crack around 376 or something like that. So that's my anecdotal input on that. Usually, I'm marking end of drying and green to yellow transition kind of at the same time. That's not always true though, because if I look in the sight glass, maybe not every single seed in the sight glass has turned yellow. Sometimes you have some yellow, you have some green. So this is a more refined notation and observation of what's really happening in front of you. But we don't have these two markers for ourselves in RoastPath at the moment that I'm aware of at this time. It's going more in depth of what I know, obviously, what I'm able to document. The challenge of using color changes as a development marker is that greens come in a wide variety of colors, and I just talked about that. So not everything will be green. Beyond that, comparing notes with other operators is tough. Yeah. We're operators. Roasters are operators. Okay. It's tough because they can easily interpret color changes differently. Yep. That's like, oh, it's yellow, right? It's like, it's yellow, green. Green, yellow. And you're like, what? Enough to make the sharing of roast data meaningless. Oh, no, right? Well, he's saying, hey, when you hit yellow, you mark it green to yellow or dry end, right? He's pointing this out, how meaningless this is. How I could say that to you guys on a video when I have like a roast, when I'm roasting and I'm telling you what I'm doing. It's more like you need to be able to see, and we're talking about sensory cues, so not just seeing. We're talking about maybe also intuition. Maybe you can add into sensory. That's maybe like a sense, right? Your intuition. Like, I feel. Based on the experience of, roasting this coffee, that this is a consistent marker of its green to yellow transition, or end of drying. I've been using those two interchangeably, so that's different, in my notation and in my database. So I'm going to think about that. Okay. Although the initial few minutes of the roast do not produce any real chemical changes or produce or impart any appreciable change in taste, the period of time it takes to drive outer seed moisture off can greatly impact on development later in the roast. Okay, saying how long it took to get there, to dry this coffee, to dry it out, basically. So we're drying off that moisture content to get it to where we can actually start roasting the coffee. How fast you got there can greatly impact on development later. Okay. The scent of Maillard, green to yellow transition. In addition, or in lieu of calling the transition by sight, the operator can elect to call a green to yellow transition at the point of a scent change. The breaking bread smell from drying hay or straw or something like the scent of baking biscuits or cookies. From hay to cookies, okay? Like, it's a little hard, right? To nail down. For me to say that to you, even though we hear it all the time, and then for you to go, okay, like if you're new, right? Difficult. The initial drying period of the roast drives off free moisture and sets the stage up for Maillard development in the mid phase of the roast. I need to remember to scroll up so you guys can follow along with me. The initial drying period of the roast drives off free moisture. Okay, I read that. Maillard reactions only take place in the absence of water. Maillard reactions liberate soluble sugars from insoluble carbohydrates, deplete chlorogenic compounds and acids, and create a cascade of higher level aromatics. Ooh. If the end of drying is marked at the site of a color change at 300 degrees and first cracked is marked at 390, green to yellow transition, scent change is usually marked around 330. All observations, okay? This is not for you guys to go, it must be, I must mark my change at 330. It just doesn't always happen that way. If it does, cool, you know? You'd have to be using the same machine that Steve is referring to here and be roasting in really, really similar environment and be using a similar green at a similar age. Okay. Okay, so that's why we don't, say that numbers and everything is a one-to-one parallel. It's not going to be the same. The time between green to yellow transition and first crack is referred to as mid-roast or sometimes Maillard phase. See the roast go exothermic towards the end of the mid-phase as the roast approaches first crack right here. Boop, boop, boop. You guys can't see my... There you go. You might see the rate of rise increase suddenly, but it's not exothermic. Okay, interesting. Maillard reactions break apart long chain molecules inside the seed. Maillard reactions occur within a relatively narrow temperature range between 300 and 390. The actual chemistry is based on long chain molecules breaking apart with the application of heat. Big molecules break down into smaller ones. Stable, smaller molecules of carbon dioxide and water are carried away in the exhaust. Unstable molecules left behind, and the seed combines a cascade of reactions to create flavors. The massive off-gassing of CO2 and H2O, carbon dioxide, and water significantly inhibits the seed's absorption of heat during mid-phase outer seed Maillard development. This slows the rate of rise. So all we're talking about here is just what's going on scientifically or molecularly in the coffee as it's going through first crack, okay? Relative to a first crack between temperature of 390, the Maillard activity in the outer seed tapers off around 370. I'm now usually, with my new probe, I'm now hitting first crack around 380 on my 1 kilogram machine, okay? Maillard activity in the outer seed tapers off around 370. The decrease in Maillard releases of carbon dioxide and water allows the seed to absorb heat much more quickly. And that's why you can sometimes see, like, after first crack has gone on for maybe, I don't know, a minute or so, you'll need to come down in your heat, or you'll see your ROR begin to spike, right? Begin to climb. Because what? The decrease in Maillard releases carbon dioxide and water and allows the seed to absorb heat much more quickly. So we see that, boop, we can see that peak a little bit. For many years, roaster operators watching the climb of the graft ROR incorrectly identified this point as exothermic. Incorrectly identified. Okay. As exothermic, giving off heat, exothermic. The change in the seed's ability to resist heat is a real problem for roast control. By the time it registers, it's too late to do anything about it. Skilled operators anticipate or are preemptive about this point and reduce latent heat energy in the roasting system with precisely timed airflow increases and fuel decreases to minimize unintentional deviations to the roast profile. Okay, so basically what that means is When we hit first crack, it starts to off gas, right? So now we know we're off gassing carbon dioxide and water in the form of like maybe steam or something, right? And so what we do when we hit first crack, typically, what do? We crank our air to high or max, right? And then typically what I do is that I counter that that action, which is to sort of swish away this sort of like excess. We're told before that it's excess heat coming off the bean. Steve says it is incorrectly identified as exothermic. This change in the seed's ability to resist heat is a real problem for roast control. By the time it registers, it's too late to do anything about it. Anyway, let me go on. I've increased my air to max, and I will counter that, typically depending on the behavior of the ROR. I don't do it every single time like clockwork without looking at the behavior of the ROR. If I look at the behavior of the ROR and I can see that it is going to trend downward or maybe crash in such a way, I will increase my gas to about 1 kPa. So I'm trying to like just like, instead of we're just going to fall down the hill, we're just going to ease our way down the hill via that ROR. And the ROR is telling me that I'm how much control I have over how fast we're coming down the hill. Okay? And what I mean by that is that descending ROR. So if I don't control it, if I don't be preemptive or anticipate my actions with the air or even the heat or with the seeds rolling around in the drum there, my ROR can be beep, beep, beep. It could spike, it could dip and do all kinds of stuff, right? So we're trying to avoid that. So we make decisions at the roaster to make that line a little bit more steady as it comes down and have a little bit more control. Okay. That's all it's saying. All right. The sound of first crack. The popping sound of first crack marks the end of midphase. The first crack is the sound of a rupture of the endosperm deep inside the seed. If you look it up, first crack temperature is of 390, probably ruptures the endosperm at something like 400 plus psi. Some interpret first crack as the first audible pop of the inner seed, but initial pops are usually outlier events from cracked or broken seeds. It is better practice to mark the onset of first crack by 3 to 5 pops in rapid succession, marking instead of the point of rolling first crack. Okay, so meaning, we heard this a lot from Derek's videos through Mill City Roasters, that pop, pop, pop. I'm listening for the pop, pop, pop. Not just pop, right? Because you'll hear that in the beginning before you get a quote-unquote rolling first crack, where it's like, right? The steam releases from the endosperm both briefly slows the roast and allows a very brief, very energetic, and very important period of Maillard development in the inner seed. Can you see the math? Development time ratios. Oh God, math, not math. If the first 3 roast stages are defined as end of drying, EOD, in the shortest time period charging at highest temperature possible without heat defect. Okay, you guys can read that. All right, it's possible to discuss general development time ratios for specific coffees. Ooh, this is going to be interesting. All right, as a thought experiment, the first roast on a spreadsheet below postulates a turning point of 230 at 130 with applied heat sufficient to achieve an average ROR of 25 degrees per minute for 4 minutes to 330 green to yellow transition. End of drying is 5 minutes 30. A later dry in for me in what I do. Since I roast hot and fast, that's later for me. Doesn't mean it's wrong, okay? Doesn't mean it doesn't mean I'm wrong. It's styles, okay? Driving the mid-phase 60 from 330 to 390. First crack in 4 minutes will require an average ROR of 15 degrees per minute. For first crack at 9 minutes 30. Okay. Post development from first crack to finish 405. Average ROR at 10 minutes per minute, or 10 degrees per minute. We'll finish the roast at 11 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Sounds like you're very, like, to me, depending on the coffee, this would be stepping more into a light medium roast for me in my style. Okay. A later first crack at 9:30. I'm usually hitting first crack around, if it's a light roast, if it's a natural processed coffee, if it's a cup that I want to have a lot of zing in the cup, a lot of acidity in the cup, like it shines that way, like it tastes good that way. Like I've even hit first crack around like 7:23, late 7 minutes to 8 minutes, at latest the 8 minutes. Yeah. And I think too, it's because of the size of my machine as well. A 1 kilo versus say a 6 kilo is going to be different. You're just going to hit markers just a little bit different. I wouldn't be surprised if like you're roasting 26 kilo machine and you're hitting first crack even into like 10 minutes. Like maybe that's normal. And then again, considering the type of green that you're using and the type of development that you want to get on that green. It can be very specialized. So it's hard to hear, shit online and then maybe hear from somebody like me who consistently roasts or notoriously roasts hot and fast on a small machine in very low quantity batches, with very high quality green, I'll say, and then maybe try to translate that to somebody who's roasting on an Alio Bullet or even a 500 milligram machine or an off-brand roasting machine. And it's really up to you guys to take the concepts, to take the theory, and then think critically and apply that of what you're seeing online to what you're doing at home, with your different situation, different green, different machine, different intuition and experience. But I think to me, that's kind of like what makes it a challenge and makes it interesting and exciting and fun when you do finally come upon something and make something great or something tastes really good in the cup based on all this information that you're learning, that didn't translate one-to-one for you because you took the concepts, you thought about it critically, you ran experiments on your own, you tasted it, you cupped it, and you found something that tastes good, and then you're really proud, really proud of what you've done. So yeah, this is not to say like you need to do it like this or like me or anything like that, but I think reading things like this and understanding the concepts, and then trying to unlock that when you're at the roaster, you're on the cupping table, and then doing it again over and over again until you find that sweet spot for you. Okay. The second roast postulates a turning point. Okay, we read all this. Cool. Chemistry is most reactive at heat. I hear this every time I talk to Steve. What does this mean? Okay, let's dive a little deeper. When development time ratios work, it's because the temperature the seed reaches has a greater effect on flavor development than the time it takes to reach the temperature. When development time ratios work, it's because the temperature the seed reaches has a greater effect on the flavor development than the time it takes. Okay. One more time. When development time ratios work, it's because the temperature the seed reaches has a greater effect on flavor development than the time. Okay. I'm getting it now. If I have a finishing temp at 405, but it took me 7 minutes to get there, it's probably not going to taste good, right? If I have a finishing temp of 405 and it took me 11 minutes to get there, it's probably going to taste better. It's because the temperature the seed reaches has a greater effect on flavor development than the time it takes to reach the temperature. The reason we manipulate the time of the roast is more advantageously matched inner and outer seed development. Post first crack Maillard development deep in the inner seed has a huge effect on the flavor of your coffee, and as little as 15 seconds difference from roast to roast is easily detectable in the cup. Moreover, all throughout your roast, the rate of chemical change and the rate of flavor development for flavor depletion increases 2 times with every 18 degrees or 10 degrees increase in temperature. Guiding the roast to a targeted flavor profile isn't like catching a speeding bullet. It's like catching an accelerating bullet. Time matters a lot in the final seconds of the roast. Yes, okay. Yeah, a lot can happen in the end of the roast. It's because the temperature the seed reaches has a greater effect on flavor development than the time it took to reach the temperature. All right, I'm going to let that marinate. All right, example only. Finish temp and flavor profiles. Oh, look, he used 405. Okay, 390 first crack. 405 finish temp. Okay. Finish temp is navigated by pattern recognition of sight and scent in the trier, as a gauge of development, and flavor profiles are developed by an iteration of variables like finish temp, development time, and time of first crack. Experienced roasters will recognize the sense of sweet smelling fur fill and pre-smoke notes, roast notes. They will note the relative darkness of the roast, a swelling in the smoothing surface of the seeds. These cues will clue the operator to the speed of the development and the conclusion of the roast. Remember how chemistry is most reactive at heat? This makes finish temp about 70% of what your customers taste, because the outside of the seed hits heat first. Okay. At worst, a poorly chosen finish temp will burn up your coffee or be raw and insoluble in the cup. Dialing in a finish temp means developing a roast profile and then repeating that roast to 3 or more finish temps with 2 degrees difference. Okay, so we can do 405, 407, and we can do 403. 2 degrees difference, maintaining the same development time. Ideally, these roasts should be cupped blind against each other to identify the finish temp closest to your ideal presentation of that coffee. Yeah, you got to cup it. All right. Post and mid-phase development. Development time dictates the relative roast level inside the seed. Your post-first crack development time is probably 20% or 25% of what your customers taste. Okay. Poorly controlled or chosen development times can waste 25% of the potential flavor you paid for. Okay, that just means sometimes you buy this expensive ass coffee, right? Maybe it's best at light roast. But if you take it to, say, 25% on the development time or the last phase of the roast, maybe you've sort of like roasted out a lot of its nuance and flavors and stuff like that. So a lot of times, so 3 palms, for example, that I roast, we have a finishing time of like, okay, something like that. Okay, so it's very light, very, very light. But for that particular natural processed, all kinds of fancy little crazy anaerobic process done to it, if I go any longer, I will have wasted 25% of the potential flavor that I paid for. Okay, so that's what he's talking about. Neither case will build your brand. Get it right and you'll be more in control of your product and probably make more money. Similar to identifying the optimal finish temp, skilled operators iterate on their post-first crack development by plus or minus 15 seconds to the same finish temp. Okay, this is something that I don't play in, and I've heard Lauren say this a couple times about yeah, 15 seconds plus or minus can be a significant difference in the taste. I'm not conscious of that. I should do that. These roasts are then blind cup against each other to determine the optimal development time to the previously determined finish temp. If the coffee still seems in want of improvement, so you think it could taste better, okay, maybe it's lackluster, operators now further manipulate the period of mid-phase development by changing the time of first crack 20 to 30 seconds, okay, while maintaining the same development times and finish temp. Okay, cool. If you feel that your coffee doesn't taste as good, but you know it can, maybe you got a good sample in of this roasted coffee, and you're like, when I roasted, it didn't taste like that. So what Steve is suggesting is by changing the first crack time to 20 or 30 seconds, so you could be, you know, it could say you cracked at like 8 minutes. You can go, okay, let's try to stretch first crack to 8 minutes 30. Stretch it by like lowering the heat, you know, whatever you need to do to stretch it. Or if you need more zing in the cup, more acidity in the cup, let's lessen that crack. Say you used to crack at 8 minutes. Let's try 7 minutes 30, right? Like my example, natural roasted, 7 minutes 28, first crack, 3 palms, right? Okay. While maintaining the same development times and finish temps. So you still want to finish, you still want to cross the finish line at the same finish temp and at the same time. But in the middle, you can play with that, okay, for the middle phase. For any given commercially viable specialty coffee roast profile, professional roasters will routinely correctly identify 2 degrees difference in finish temp and a 15-second difference in post-first crack and development 95% of the time. Ooh, wow. Yeah, I'm not there yet. Yeah, I would play with this of like when I really wanted to go light and the coffee did well going light, hot and fast. I'd play with finishing temps a lot, and I would get a little confused myself in that sometimes some coffees that were anaerobically processed or had a little bit more processing done to them, and they were natural process coffees. Like I could even go as light as 385, 387 and it would still taste great to me, to me. And then, I don't know, later on as I kept roasting and it wasn't tasting as great, I was using a different green but still processed with a lot of weird anaerobic processes. I would play with like 390, 395, 397, things like that. And yeah, it would be just a little bit more roasty. And then in the back of my mind, that little bit more roastiness meant that it was more marketable, in that meaning that more people would like it because it was more not so niche in its flavors, right? So just playing a little bit more to the nostalgic coffee taste that everybody and their mom drinks and is familiar with. Maybe not familiar with like champagne tasting notes, but like totally familiar with like Dunkin' Donut coffee note, right? and thus in my mind making it more marketable, selling more coffee versus creating the best coffee cup, the best quality coffee that you can. Doesn't always line up. To me, in my experience, it doesn't always line up. Okay. And those are all personal decisions that you make. Maybe not if you're just an operator, but if you are the roaster and the operator of your business, then you'll probably make that decision. All right. Second crack. That's dark stuff. Controlled tastes good. Ooh. That's a shirt, Steve. Control tastes good. Roasting is cooking. And by necessity, a sensory-driven process. Better coffee out of the cooling tray starts with a superior green. Yes. In order to make good coffee, you got to have good green. Period. Right? Because you can sometimes roast it poorly be a newbie, but if you have really good green, it's kind of hard to mess it up, honestly. It's drinkable, you know. It's not going to be like you have to throw it away or something, unless you literally burnt it or under roasted it. Crazy. Tight control of roast to intentional results. Craft in coffee is the intersection of the ability and understanding of the operator, the quality of the operator's tools, and the systematic and intentional way the tools are used to surprise and delight our customers with our coffee. Good machinery combined with good green, good technique is a great way to attract and retain good customers. Good. Do good. All right. I wore the perfect hat for this. Yeah, that one sentence there just threw me off in that I don't think my brain is awake right now because I'm down to 1 cup of coffee per day now. I have to watch my caffeine intake. Towards the end, where was that? I forgot. Anyway, let me know what you guys thought. I'll put this link in the description. Some really great things coming through this site. As a person who I'm not like paid or sponsored, okay? So this is still honest documentarian vlogging. Hopefully at its best. But good stuff here. And I understand your frustration if you're reading a lot of things online, watching a lot of things online, and things aren't clicking for you yet. Just hang in there, okay? Keep learning, keep gathering all the data, lock it away, put it in little categories, organize the data that you're learning, keep roasting. Know that you don't have to subscribe to any one method. You're going to find your own way if you just keep doing it. All right. Don't get discouraged or anything like that. And ask questions, no need to be dogmatic about anything. Ask questions, be open, be kind, do good. Yes. Okay. And you'll find your way, around the whole roasting thing. I know it's overwhelming in the beginning, but hopefully you're having fun still being overwhelmed. All right. We will see you in the next one. Bye.